Hello and welcome to 2D Animation and Interactivity. As your week 2 document states, this is the real beginning. Hopefully you spent this past week getting Flash, downloading it, dealing with your end of the software. And if you have any problems with that, make sure you email me, talk to me about what's going on. Just as an aside, and I want to reiterate this, if you haven't downloaded Flash yet, you clearly need to for this week. And as the syllabus states, you can get Flash for free for a month. And most of you guys are probably going to be paying the single app fee for Flash, which I think is going to be about 30 bucks a month. So here we are, 1st of September-ish. You can use Flash for 30 days, say September, and then pay for that October, November, and December, and then our semester is over. This is clearly up to you in terms of how you want to work with Flash or really any other Adobe product as you move forward from this class. I'm not going to talk too much about the cloud. You can read tons and tons of articles about the cloud, but Adobe has switched to this cloud computing pretty much over the spring and summer of this year. So it's a different way of buying and dealing with software, and there's tons of opinions and lots of grumblings about it, etc. But please make sure you have a version of Flash that you can work with. As the syllabus states, you can work with Flash 5.56 or the CC, which is the Creative Cloud version. Unless you had 5.5 or 6, it's not necessarily something that's easy to get right now because they have switched to this cloud computing. Okay, so with all that said, what are we doing with this video? Well, this video is going to be deemed Flash Basics, and it's one of the few videos you're going to watch during the semester in which we don't actually do anything. You can follow along and should follow along, take some notes, sort of understand the concepts behind this, but this video is clearly about concepts, meaning what is Flash, where things are in Flash, what things look like, and sort of explaining real basics. Okay. If you're new to Flash, again, this is going to be something you might watch once or twice, might go back to as you head into the exercises that we're going to do for this week, trying to understand particular concepts. Okay. As an aside, I use a screen capture program called Screencast-O-Matic. So you'll be able to see my mouse move around. It's very helpful in terms of letting you know where I am, and I try to be very sort of clear and measured and pointed in my movements with my mouse so that you can sort of see exactly what it is that I'm doing. Okay, so one thing we have to define before we move on to anything else is what is Flash. Flash is clearly, in a most sort of basic term, a animation program, a program that allows for interactivity within animation, and it can do a lot more, but that's what we're going to use it for. I had several emails of people asking me if we were going to do this or that with it, or tons of other things it can do. We are going to use it for an animation program and for an interactive program, meaning that at points later in the semester, you'll be able to pose your viewer or your user, however you want to define them, with some choices. Do you want to go here? Do you want to go there? And we'll be working with some simple interactivity. Okay. So, what is Flash? In another sense, Flash is a vector-based program. A vector-based program can be thought of in terms of math. That's how I like to define it, math. Meaning that you set up certain relationships between, say, 2 points on 2 drawn points, and then you tell the computer to do a series of math equations to define how the curvature of the line between those 2 points is defined, what color it is, and the computer figures that out for you. I always say computers are very, very good at math, and they do it very, very quickly. Okay. The sort of easier way to think about it, if you've worked with any other Adobe products, is Adobe Illustrator is another vector-based program. And the idea behind these programs is that they work very quickly with graphics. These graphics are able to be scaled a great deal. We can blow these things up without losing much quality or any quality at all. And they're much more flexible in those realms. The way to think about it, another way to think about it, is in relation to other graphic type programs you might know, which are something like Photoshop. Photoshop is a raster-based program or a pixel-based program. We all probably can imagine zooming in on a photograph that we've downloaded from the internet or we created ourselves, and if we zoom in far enough, we start to see little tiny dots, pixels. I think we all probably know what pixels are. Vector-based graphics do not do this. We can zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. We won't see sort of pixels that make this object up or this shape up. We will simply see a smooth line. Raster-based graphics are great because they can define things photographically, and we can sort of see things in a more photographic sense. Those file types are larger, more cumbersome, and the vector-based graphics are considerably smaller. Vector-based graphics are also more what might be considered graphics, more graphic type things, logos, text, things that have sort of flatter or gradient type color where that's not sort of defined in the photographic sense. That might be a vector-based graphic. Okay, so there's upsides and downsides to both. Later in the semester, we'll actually be working with raster-based graphics and bringing them into Flash, turning them into vector-based graphics. So there is the possibility of using photographs or using a scan drawing as something you might then animate in Flash. Okay, so enough talk. 6 minutes there without doing anything on the screen here, but unfortunately had to be done. What I'm going to do, and this is the screen that you'll see when you open up Flash or something like this, depending on how you've set your program up, and it'll say create new. Generally speaking, for the most part during this semester, we're going to create a new ActionScript 3.0 file. Now, ActionScript 3.0 is simply sort of the generic and more basic Flash file, and just as an aside, ActionScript is Flash's programming language. Those of you who have done other, maybe some web development might know what HTML or something like that is. ActionScript is Flash's language that lets us sort of create interactivity. Later in the semester we're going to work with interactivity, and we're going to be working with some very simple scripts. This is not a programming class, this is not a ActionScript class by any stretch of the imagination. But at points during the semester and mid-semester on, especially when we get to the more interactive things, you are going to be working with scripting. And we denote that by creating an ActionScript 3.0 file. ActionScript 2.0 was its older version. It was considerably different in terms of how it handled interactivity. So we want to make sure we're using ActionScript 3.0, especially those of you who happen to be working with an older version of Flash. Okay, so I'm going to create a new ActionScript 3.0 file. Boom. And voila, I enter into Flash. One thing to notice up here on the top right is what's called sort of defining your workspace. If you click on this and choose different sort of versions of this, it takes a second to pop back and forth. Go to Classic. These are different sort of workspaces, and what this means is it allows you to have different windows open in order to sort of do different things in Flash. I am for the most part going to be using the Classic because it has sort of for the most part what I need in it in order to get what I need to get done in some of these basic exercises. Later in the semester, depending on what we do, I might switch to a different workspace, and that will always be denoted as I sort of head into the exercise. So up here I have Classic. Now, when we open up this Classic workspace, you're going to see a lot of different things. And I'm going to want to just sort of define these things so that as we move into the exercises, you sort of understand what it is I'm talking about. First thing we have over here on the left is the toolbox. The toolbox can be displayed a couple different ways. I like to have it sort of displayed in this long, skinny version. You can sort of play with it and display it in different ways, but I like the sort of long version to sort of help with space. Our toolbox, much like other graphic programs or Adobe programs, has all these tools in them. We're not going to learn all of them right now. We're going to learn a couple of them that are going to help us in these exercises to come. The first one is what's called the selection tool, and it's the black arrow. It's the top tool in the toolbox, and it's going to allow us to grab things on our stage, move them around, change them. Okay, so our selection tool. The next thing we are likely going to use is our oval tool. And our oval tool is a simple tool that we can sort of draw things with. Okay, so black selection tool or selection tool, oval tool. And last but not least, it's not necessarily a tool, but rather sort of a setting or something you have to pay attention to. And this is going to become very important as we move through the semester. It's what's called the stroke and fill color. If you've ever worked with Illustrator, you know this is sort of a similar idea. The stroke color is the color that when you draw an object that is stroked around the edge. The fill color is the color that is sort of filled in the middle. As we get to your first exercise, which is going to be making a simple motion tween, I'm going to be drawing a graphic and illustrating how this stroke and fill color work. Okay. Next, right in the middle here, we have what's called our stage. Our stage is basically where we put stuff, okay? Where we put stuff in order to animate. It's sort of the visual representation of what's happening in our Flash movie. Up here on the top right, we can zoom in and out of this in order to see it a little more closely, a little more further away. And it's probably the thing you should get most used to using here at the beginning. Okay, you will notice that unlike some other graphic type programs, we have this gray area off to the left and right and top and bottom. And this is important because we will often animate from the left over to the right, and we can sort of go off the stage, back onto the stage. And that's useful in terms of creating things sort of moving off stage or left or off stage right. Okay. Two more things. Up here we have the timeline. I'm not going to get too much into the timeline, but clearly we are animating things, so things happen over time. Unlike a static program such as Illustrator or Photoshop, things are happening over time. We're moving things around, and we're going to get used to this idea of frames and keyframes. These are where we are going to denote that this or that is going to happen, and we need to sort of do something within these frames. You'll notice that I have layer 1 right here. Probably can imagine we can add tons and tons of different layers to have tons and tons of different things going on. Okay. Last and certainly not least, and I'm going to go over here to this portion of our workspace, you'll see a Properties tab, which we're going to work with later, but I want you to click on the Library tab. The library, which is currently empty because this is a new Flash file of which I have really nothing going on in it yet, is where we store things. We're going to store what's called symbols in there. And underneath symbols, or within symbols, we're going to have different types of symbols. Here in this first week, we're going to be working with a symbol called a graphic. And this is the most basic type of symbol you can make in Flash. We'll have, depending on the movie, tons and tons of different symbols in here. And one might be, for week 1 here, we're going to do a green ball, and we're going to make this green ball move across the stage. Later in the semester, as you guys work on your projects, you might have various characters, a car, a house, the green grass, who knows, whatever your movies sort of entail, they're going to live inside that library. Unlike the symbols living on the stage, we sort of store the masters in the library, meaning that if I were going to take my green ball, which we'll do on the next exercise, and put it out on the stage, I'm only taking a copy of it. I'm not actually taking the thing. These symbols can be reused and reused to be efficient, to be efficient in terms of creating your movies, and we'll learn that as we move through the semester. So, quick review. We have our toolbox with our selection tool, our oval tool, and our stroke and fill. We have the stage where things happen. We have the timeline where we denote how and when things happen. And we have the library. This again is your Flash basics. In a minute you'll sort of move on to your first real exercise where you're going to be doing something, and you'll be using these concepts. So again, feel free to look at this again to review, but we'll get into more specifics as we head into the real exercise videos.